Roll it down. Hi everybody, my name's Scott Hillier. I'm an independent film director and president of ECU, the European Independent Film Festival, the All Asian Independent Film Festival, and the soon-to-be-announced All African Independent Film Festival. Welcome to another edition of ECU Friday Live, where we bring our audiences informative, entertaining, we hope, and great advice for independent film directors by a great, two great guests we have today. We normally have great guests, and today's not a difference to that. But today we're dealing with something that is impacting me directly, which I think is going to be impacting other filmmakers, and that's the use of LED walls versus green screen. Now, I've just had an offline discussion with the two directors we'll be talking to today, and we both laughed at the fact that we've all shot hundreds, if not thousands, of green screen imagery in our films. But now with the LED walls, it appears that it's getting more traction, it's better or not, and that's what we're exploring today. So I read a little intro written up by one of my clever young things here in the office, but LED walls are a cutting-edge technology that's transformed the industry by replacing traditional green screens with high-resolution dynamic displays. Unlike green screens, LED walls provide realistic backgrounds in real time, enhancing the immersion for both actors and audiences, because we've all seen what it's like when you're talking to a green tennis ball into a thing, which is very, very difficult to do for actors. From creating outer-worldly landscapes to simulating complex lighting scenarios, these versatile tools have become an integral part of modern filmmaking, or not, because I haven't used them yet, but they do offer unique creative possibilities for directors and cinematographers. So to explore this, we've got two film directors who have very, very nicely given us their time. They're waking up in California, so it's early for them, but that's what filmmakers do. We get up earlier than everybody else because that's what winners do. So first of all, I'm going to introduce Byron Q. Now, Byron is a award-winning filmmaker, director, and writer currently based in Los Angeles, California. He's the creator of the production company Beyond Cinema Production, and he's produced many award-winning films, including Bang Bang and Las Vegas Story. Most recently, he's been at the forefront of technological advancements using LED walls for many productions, including a recent film called Killing of the Machine. So, Byron, how are you doing, man?
Hello. Good morning, everyone. I'm doing great.
Excellent. Again, thank you very much for your time, Byron. We're gonna play a few videos over the top of you as you talk. But why don't you tell me and the audience a little bit about your journey to here?
Yeah. Like you mentioned, I've been making films for over 10 years. My first feature was Bang Bang, and then I did a documentary film, and then I did Las Vegas Story, which starring Eric Roberts and Wade Elaine Marcus, and kind of did everything in between, like editing, VFX, production, produced films as well, music videos, all sorts of stuff. And then around 2020, I think, yeah, and during the pandemic, that's when I'm sure, like a lot of people, was just sitting at home watching YouTube, looking at random stuff, and I came across some videos about this thing called virtual production, and I was quite intrigued right from the start. So I just, really dived deep into it, learned a lot about it, and yeah, once I found out about it, I really just couldn't stop learning more about it, and especially with Unreal Engine being free, um, super accessible. And it really just changed my perception of filmmaking, because I had a lot of ideas and projects that I wanted to make, but they were like fantastical or, sci-fi, things that when you're an indie filmmaker, you don't think to make because you always associate that with like the big studio movies. And that was true, because this short film that I did called Killing of a Machine, there was no way I could have made this without using Unreal Engine and LED wall and virtual production. I had even tried to look into it. Like I, contacted a company out in Iceland to see how much it would cost to go out there and shoot. And yeah, it was like over 100,000 just to do the short film. So yeah, it really changed my world because then I was able to actually create the short film that I had written years ago, just for fun, really. And then I was able to really just go and shoot it. And it was crazy. It was a huge learning experience for me, of course, quite difficult, but ultimately I was able to um, almost complete it. We're kind of at that last stage of post-production with some VFX work. But yeah, it's really a game changer for sure.
Well, Byron, I can't wait to delve and dive in a little bit deeper on that to get sort of some more hands-on knowledge about that. But I'd like to introduce our second guest, Johnny Zeller, who's also over in California. He's an award-winning director and filmmaker with many years of cross-continent production experience. He started out as a cameraman and editor, as I guess we all do, but he's now a director, directing commercials for Toyota, Google, and Paris Hilton fragrances. And some of his work, which I've just seen recently, is the trailer for the upcoming video game Crossfire Sierra Squad, and I saw some of that, and I just loved it. So, Johnny, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, Johnny Zeller, been like you said, all of us started off editing, shooting, producing, kind of similar background as Byron. A lot of action sports, trying to be a pro snowboarder and skateboarder, and you grab the camera and get out there and shoot and hand the camera to your buddies, and then you end up going to the hospital enough times, so you say, well, I'm going to go get behind the camera and leave that to somebody else. So yeah, just kind of have been in the branded and content space for the last 10, 12 years, and a little bit in the scripted space, a little in TV, working on a documentary about jetpacks right now. So, we get out there and tell the stories that we can find and that inspire us. And sometimes that's commercials and because we get paid, and sometimes that's docs and shorts because we get to tell fun stories. So
That's we're very much kindred spirits on this one. That's what we do. We prostitute ourselves out to get some money to go and be able to tell some stories our way. But tell me a little bit about your use of LED walls. We've got a bit of work, some footage that we'll play over the top of you as you talk. But it's fantastically interesting. But tell me a little bit about your entree into the LED walls world.
So I had been wanting to work with the wall since I saw the Mandalorian behind the scenes videos in 2020 or whenever a few years ago when they came out, and just got obsessed with the idea of how do we make this? How do we work with this tool? And like everybody has experienced, they're incredibly expensive, and it's a different workflow process than many brands and agencies are used to. So it's kind of a tough sell. It's getting better now, but at the time it was a really tough sell to say, hey, everything that you're used to doing, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it this completely new way. And so it was more of a struggle of how do I sell it through? How do I market something that isn't even mine, but I want to use the tool? And finally got the chance to work with it on this video game trailer, and just can't say enough about how much I enjoyed it. So yeah, no more pain of green screen.
Yeah. As we talk about this, we'll overlay you a little bit with this. But tell us about the concept and how does it work? There we go.
The wall.
Yeah, the wall on this particular clip.
So what we did here is we actually got the Unreal assets from the game company itself. And so this particular shot was what we created, but the rest of the world is actually inspired by the game. So the game was built in Unreal Engine, and so we had access to just this super expansive world, multiple different sets, locations, interiors, exteriors, like the whole gamut. And the gaming company was surprisingly okay with us making adjustments to the world, as long as they were using whatever assets were already in there. So like if we wanted to have a grenade fly through, or we wanted to turn on a light, have an explosion blow out a window, those kinds of things, they were okay with us making those adjustments as long as we were in the world. So we had this massive, I remember we were doing virtual scouting, and I was on Zoom, and we just flew through this crazy world, and it was like, oh, that area looks cool. Let's go check that out. And so the camera would fly down there, and we would look at this little area, and yeah, you know what? We need something with a bit more of a vista view. So then we'd fly over to another area. And so we just explored this game world just by kind of, virtual camera flying around. And I was just already like totally hooked. And we knew that we could shoot about 15 shots per shoot day. And it's the broadcast spot was 30 seconds. And so you can't really use more than that. But then the longer web version, maybe closer to 90 seconds. We knew we could only do 15 shots per day. And so we had to pick exactly what those environments were going to be for every single shot. When we showed up to the scout, I worked with the DP, this guy David Clausen, who had shot a lot of stuff with the wall before, and I had an Xbox controller, and was staring at this big wall, and just panning and tilting around with the DP, trying to find the specific angle. We had the camera there, so we matched it with the lens. Like, okay, let's lower the sun so we can backlight and get some lens flare. All those kinds of things with an Xbox controller, just finding the frame. And we did that all day for every single shot. We shot for 2.5 days. And so we picked each one of those shots. And then when we were on set, it was really easy to just queue up. Okay, we're moving on to shot 2A, and that background pulls up on the backdrop. And so it was a pretty, like, the prep work of it was much different than what I had experienced before, but it was so much better because once we got to set, there was no guessing, there was no screwing around.
I guess I'm gonna jump back to you now, Byron. Listening to Johnny there, it seems that pre-production counts a lot more. I mean, I think we all pre-produce as we go into a thing anyway, but on green screen, because it's just green and you're going to fix it up in post, it doesn't appear that it obviously isn't the same way. So how does it sort of affect the way that you go into a project when you start pre-producing a LED wall shoot?
Right. So the workflow changes a lot because traditionally you're going through a linear process, right? But with the LED wall, you're doing what they call IC-VFX. So it's like in-camera VFX. That means you have to have your background, your VFX stuff prepared ahead of time. Because what you put on the wall, that's going to be your final VFX. You can make, overlay some adjustments and stuff, but for the most part, that's pretty much what you're going to get. So, but the great thing about this workflow, though, is that now you can already see what you're working with, and the actors can be in that environment, so they can act off of real environments instead of having to, imagine there's like a giant pirate ship and things are exploding. So for performances, that's going to be huge. But also you just see more of that, it's essentially you're pre-planning and pre-preparing everything.
It seems to me that you've really got to do that, and again, that's a hesitation that I guess we have to get over, because it is a seismic mental change, isn't it? Because it's like, yeah, let's just shoot this and then we'll move it around in post. But in this situation, it's like, let's do the post first. What were the challenges that you sort of didn't expect that happened that you had to work around?
Yeah, there was a lot of challenges. One small thing, I mean, it seems kind of small, but it kind of bugged us. So there's these camera trackers that we use called from Moses. And we didn't realize that if you build the light, it's going to block some of those trackers from being seen from the device that was on the camera. So, for us, it was a new thing for all of us going into it, including my DP. This was his first virtual production shoot. So we were really learning as we went. So that was one thing that kind of bumped us. But I mean, I think at every stage of the process, it was challenging just because we were learning as we were doing it.
It's always good to be a little bit scared, but right? Johnny, what about you, man? What are, going into this for the first time, all of a sudden you've got something in your brain and then it kicks in and you walk onto the set in the first day? What were the challenges you faced, unexpected challenges, and how did you sort of get over them?
Yeah, I mean, like every production, there's something that goes wrong and you have to kind of overcome it. I went into it because I was so excited about using the tool. I was kind of naive to how challenging using a new technology could be. So I guess I say that I make up with a lack of talent with enthusiasm, and most of the time that gets you pretty far. And so I was fortunate to have a really good technical team behind it that was used to work they had worked with this wall many times. The DP had used this wall and had shot other things. So I had a really good team around me. So when I didn't know something, I felt pretty confident that, well, it was okay to ask because everybody knew it was my first time doing it. So I think sometimes we have to put ego aside and say, okay, well, what is the problem? I don't know. And then if you know what the problem is, maybe that outside perspective could help solve it, or it could at least contribute to an answer. I was the dumbest in the room when it came to this tech, and that was okay. I was all right with it. And the wall went out, like just turned off for an hour. And when you're wall to wall on your schedule and your AD's tapping his foot, that sucks. But we just said, okay, well, we've got a series of close-ups on our shot list. Let's pivot. Let's shoot all of those now. That they don't need the wall. We need triggers being pulled. We need shells falling out of the gun. We need feet running along the ground. Like, okay, well, let's spend the next hour doing that while they troubleshoot the wall and keep the client happy, keep the agency happy by showing them weapons and letting them take, just like keep everybody busy and happy while we go and shoot the stuff that we can't get with the wall. So that was the biggest thing. The other quick issue that I didn't think about was that so we had a treadmill that our talent ran on because our wall is only about 30 feet. It wasn't as big as the one that Byron used. So we had a treadmill. So in the running shots, he's running on a treadmill, and we just shot, mediums and close-ups. And then we had this orbiting shot. Now, when your background is only one plane, you can't orbit the camera 360 around it because you only have one plane to work with. So we had to get a turntable, like a Lazy Susan electric turntable. So he stood on that. And then we had to program the wall to rotate in the opposite direction so that we got that effect. Like the camera is not moving at all, but the talent and the wall are moving. And so it appears that we're doing this 360 dolly move. And all of that stuff had been discussed ahead of time. And when we got to set, it didn't work. The timing was off. And so it was one of those, oh shit moments of, okay, well, so you just turn the treadmill up incrementally, and then do you shoot at a slower shutter frame or a slower frame rate? And we had syncing issues with shutter speed. But I would say the big thing with the motion is if you are going to move the talent on a treadmill, on a Lazy Susan, something like that, you have to actually bake, and I probably am using the wrong term, but that motion has to be essentially recorded on and played back on the wall. So it's a slightly different process than the live motion tracking that's happening every other time. And so that was like one of those moments where we said, okay, well, we have to time it, and then we have to essentially record it and then play it back. And if that timing is wrong, we have to start over and do it again. And that was like pulling hair out, challenging and frustrating, and again, ticking clock. So we got there, we figured it out, but it was just another one of those steps that was like, okay, well, not everybody has done that kind of thing on the wall. Certainly people have, but it's a different process. You can see in this shot here, like we actually have the dolly grip is pulling foreground elements on dolly track to help simulate the idea that that he's running through this room. So it was just extra moving parts that I certainly didn't think about until we got in there and had to sort out. So
Well, the first time's always the hardest time, right? So
yeah,
the next time I wanted to ask you specifically about that because I picked that in the trailer, the moving around, and I figured it was a lazy Susan, but well done. But I didn't think about the whole timing issue. So I may steal a little bit of your experience when I eventually get into one of these and go, oh, I know about this.
yeah, that's what we're here for.
Yeah, no, and great. Johnny, I'm gonna. No, sorry, Byron. I'm going to come back to you. I mean, we talked about technical issues. I'm surrounded by a dozen clever young things here at the Echo office, and I can put up a green screen and shoot what I want, and then go and play in After Effects and whatever and make this. It doesn't sound like that's the same thing when you put up a wall. It seems that you need a lot of trained technical people. It seems to me again that we need a lot more people.
Actually, you don't need as many people as you would on a live action shoot, just because you're not using as many lights. And it is true, you do need to have technical people that understand how to use the wall and also Unreal Engine. But for me, like, I learned Unreal on my own. Like, that background, I actually created that as one of my first projects. It took a while to get there, but because I understood how Unreal worked, I was also kind of like jumping into the computer and moving things around a little bit. So yeah, but one thing I do want to kind of impress upon people is that, especially with green screen and LED, you can actually use green screen in what we call virtual production. So a lot of times people think, oh, I have to either do this or that. You can actually do both. For my short film, we use both green screen and LED wall. You can use the same technology of Unreal Engine and real-time rendering with the green screen by having it be like a temporary plate in the background, so you have a reference, and then shoot it on the green screen, but you have that camera tracking data, which then you bring into Unreal and you export the background later on as like a finalized render, and then you can slap it in there. So why would you use green screen sometimes and not the LED wall? Well, for us, our wall actually wasn't that big, so for some of the wide shots, I couldn't get it on the wall. It was too wide of a shot. So we did that stuff on the green screen. Where the wall really is effective is when you're kind of like medium or close up, you get some of that light spilling onto the actor's face, or in The Mandalorian, they had that shiny shield. That's when like the wall really is like what you want to do, because it kind of creates a way better effect. But if you're super wide, you're not going to get that kind of effect. So you can get away with the green screen. And like the running shots, like how Johnny did, he could have also done that on green screen if he had a separate stage for that. So that's the biggest thing I want to tell people, that don't be misconstrued. You could do both, and sometimes it might be better to go with the green screen.
Just we're going to overlay a little bit of green screen now, but just explain that just a little bit more in depth. I don't know the Unreal Engine. Tell me a little bit about that.
So Unreal Engine originally was a game engine that they used to create video games, and then in the last few years, the rendering capabilities has gone to a level where you can now use it for cinematics, like on the LED wall. So what it does is you're basically streaming that background onto the LED wall, or in the case of green screen, you're putting it into like a virtual background on your monitor. Right? So here we have the green, but you can see on the monitor that the green is already filled in, and it's tracked with the camera. So if you move the camera, the background also moves so that you mimic the same, POV.
Okay. And how do you actually get that? Sorry, just on set. If you're on set, you hook your camera into the computer with Unreal Engine, right? Is that how you do it?
Yeah. As long as you have it connected to the computer, you can get that working on Unreal. And then you might need some other plugins to, do the whole streaming to the monitor kind of thing. For the wall, you have a separate system, right? Like that takes a lot of computational power to run the wall. And that's another thing. It's like, okay, you're doing the wall, that's going to get a little bit more expensive. You're going to need some technical people. With the green screen, you're not going to need all that,
So my takeaway is that there are two options, and either all, you can do 100% with the wall or 100% with green screen, but you can also mix the two, which would be a great option. Johnny, I'm going to bounce back to you for a second, mate. We talked about your DP. He's already done some work on this. As somebody who still picks up a camera and plays around with lots of lights because it makes me feel happy. Is there something that DPs really have to be aware of? And my immediate reaction is reflections, because monitors and LEDs have certain things that reflect back at you.
I think the positive, that's almost more of a positive than it is a negative, because you're feeling that the reflections, like say if you had a car or something like that, they say there's something about a car that makes it, there's like the uncanny valley between the realism of it, and I'm totally blowing the quote here, but it was basically like the reflections and the imperfections of a car is what makes it feel real. And so I think that ideology, when you're dealing with anything reflective in an LED situation, is you want that spilled, because in green screen, either you don't get it, or worse, you get a little bit of green spill, and it's, your VFX team calls you and starts screaming about why you didn't do it right. So I think that it's a positive, and we kept the talent 5 or 6 feet, maybe 1 to 2 meters away from the wall, as just a way to kind of bypass any potential problems with exposure or weirdness of getting too close to the wall. Mm-hmm. We also, I can't stress enough the need for production design. As we saw in Byron's stuff too, there's a lot of production design. The wall is just one piece of the set. It isn't the set. And so we had a fake floor. We had stuff to break up the bottom, so there's not just a flat line between the ground and that horizon. So rubble, dirt, grass, crates, anything that you can do to kind of break up that thin straight line between your floor and the wall goes a really long way. And then we kind of lived by the rule, or have always tried to live by the rule of, like, if the talent is touching it, it should be practical. And that way, you can't always do that, but we try to include as much production design as possible to alleviate those kind of issues.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm talking to you now, so I'll bounce back to you directly. But as independent filmmakers, many of the audience, including myself, let's talk about cost. Is it, what's a reward here? So, obviously for me, I'm enamored by the idea, and I cannot wait to start talking to clients about it. But are they going to balk at the cost versus me going in and putting up a big green screen?
Cost is always going to be an issue, and every situation is different. There's no kind of one size fits all. We've found that it makes a lot of sense when you need to go to many locations in one day. So you don't have any company moves, you don't have any permits, and the location fee is kind of built into the price of that wall. So those are big factors to kind of weigh when you're thinking about doing it. Also, if you have to shoot with pretty light, and your alternative is either going and shooting a plate at sunset and then putting it on the green screen or something like that, you can shoot sunset all day. You could have 10 hours of blue hour. So all of the creative factors, I think, have to work in tandem with the logistical and the financial to determine whether or not it makes sense or not. Also, if you need to shoot at the top of Mount Everest or somewhere that's cold, and you don't want to screw around with having to send your talent back to the warming trailer every 15 minutes, that would kill your schedule. So it makes sense to do something interior. I think also turnaround time is a big deal, because you can get into VFX hell when you're working with green screen. And so if you have a quick turnaround, then the LED wall makes quite a bit more sense, because you still have to go through post, but you don't have the VFX elements to deal with in post.
I'm going to go back. Oh, sorry. No, I was going to go back to Byron in a second, but I did want to ask you one question about this. I mean, you obviously shot in, color grading. I mean, versus VFX. Taking out the green screen. Was that an issue? I mean, I've got color graders here beside me, and I was like, the other day, I was like, well, if you do this in log, what does it do? How's the grading work? The difference between your camera image and the screen image, was there any issue there?
No, not that I mean, we shot with the Sony Venice I want to say the assets on the wall also had a similar color profile, or it was designed to be the same so that we didn't have to grade the wall and the talent separately. It just was all one thing.
Yeah, and that was my question when I came in and I talked to my color graders in the office. I was like, you have to be really careful about this, because there is a possibility you will have two things here. So when you do an overall grade, you could be really totally screwed. But I guess that again goes back into the pre-production. You make sure your camera profile matches the profile of the wall. But again, a good tip.
Bring the camera to prep. Shoot some tests and run it through a quick pass, even if it's at your house and you're throwing a 709 LUT on it, just to make sure.
Yeah, no, yes, it sort of drove me home. I was like, oh shit, I want to ask that question, so I'm glad I did. Byron, talk to me about the cost, green screen versus LED.
Well, yeah, definitely for cost, when you first look at this stuff, you might think like, oh man, I'll never be able to afford that. And I got some quotes from studios out here, and they were like, oh, $60,000 a day just to use the wall. But the thing is, once I really started digging into it, there's a lot of independent studios that have their own little walls. You don't need that Mandalorian volume, and some of these smaller stages are actually quite affordable if you negotiate with them. Talk to them, tell them you're an independent filmmaker or you're a student filmmaker, you want to make something cool. A lot of times, if it's not being used, and right now, a lot of these walls are not being used, they're willing to negotiate with you if your project is if you pitch it right, And also for the crew, a lot of people, for my project, it was their first time. So we all kind of just banded together. Definitely some of the technicians got paid their rate, but a lot of people were willing to volunteer or come on for much lower rate than they were used to, just for the fact of hey, now we get to learn virtual production and be on set and learn from this experience. So that was a huge thing for me. And yeah, that's my biggest thing, and some of the assets that you use to create the background, you might think well, I'm not a VFX artist, that's going to cost millions of dollars to do. And that's not true, because there's a thing called Quixel Bridge, which is a free software that is integrated with Unreal Engine. And they have tons and tons of photo scanned assets that you can use to create your background. You don't need to create everything from scratch. So it's actually quite fast for somebody who knows how to use that software to go in and build an entire set. There's pre-existing kits, if you needed a cave or a Roman ruins, whatever it might be, there's already existing kits that you can just pull from and then go in and customize specifically for your scene.
That's pretty wild. And it does make it so much more accessible.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a VFX artist, and I was able to create my own background.
Yeah. Man,
so yeah,
that's cool.
It's pretty cool.
I would imagine too, looking at that library of assets, it probably sparks a lot of creativity too, because you see things that you never would have thought you could have used or would have been possible. I would think that would be pretty fun in the development process too.
I'm glad you said that, because that's one thing that I realized as a writer and director myself is sometimes I'm just playing around in the engine, and I'll bring in a character that I found on Sketchfab, and then as I'm looking at this thing, I'm what kind of story could come out of this? And I've actually done a few things where I'm brainstorming stuff. So I think for writers, it could be a huge thing as well.
Well, you guys are teaching us so much stuff. It's ridiculous. So I thank you very much for sharing your knowledge on this, because I'm learning a lot of stuff here and taking notes and whatever. And I will go back to this and definitely do this. But I'm going to pass you on to Rodrigo, who's the festival coordinator of all of this craziness, and he's going to host a question and answer session. We'll be quite quick, but just with a lot of the ECU staff who I'm sure have a lot of stuff to do. So it's over to you, Rodrigo.
Thank you. So the first question is comes from Eduardo, actually.
Yeah, it comes to me. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks so much for elucidating a bit about this technology. We talk about how it impacts the flow of production, of pre-production, post-production, and so on. I wanted to ask about how it impacts the times of production. So do you spend more time shooting? It's harder for the actor. Is it easier for the actors to just interact with the LED walls? Or is just about the same, just shifting from pre to post and vice versa?
Johnny, you want to take that one, or?
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll take it from a creative standpoint. I feel like it was easier for the actors to get their timing right, and I think we were able to shoot. Once we were shooting, it was faster because everybody could see what was on the wall, what we were doing, and so there were less questions, less second guessing. Had to spend less time with the talent explaining, okay, this is this crazy world and there's going to be an explosion coming over. They don't have to try to interpret it in their head. They can just look and see it. And so I think they could get into character faster because of that. But in terms of like the assets, we spent quite a bit more time in pre-production and we spent very little time in post. We added muzzle flashes and like dirt charges and some things like that, but like kind of more After Effects compositing things rather than going deep into back into Unreal or anything like that.
Perfect, thank you.
Thanks so much.
Our next question comes from Christine.
Hello. The creation of the VFX, was it more complicated to create them before without an actor to use as reference than doing them afterwards?
Well, I'll take this one. So the assets, I mean, one thing that you could do is you can actually 3D scan your actor and then bring that object into the world. Now you have a reference of the actor, right? But for me, I didn't do that until we were actually shooting. So, I kind of built the world out, and then I would create like I took a metahuman, which is like a realistic digital character, and I would use that as for the pre-visualization. So I had created the entire short film as a previs inside Unreal using the same assets that I ultimately used on the wall, just so I can understand how the story worked, and how the beats were. So then when we went to the wall, it was like I just took that same background and then I took the actual character out and then put the actor in. But the other thing is you can photo scan objects that you had on set and then import that into the background. So then you can kind of really blend everything together using the same stuff.
Thank you very much for that, Byron. Now, our next question comes from Shuena.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. My question is for Brian. Just out of curiosity, I want to know, can you use both at the same time? For example, writing a mythical creature on a LED sky background?
So let me see if I have that clear. So you want to have a character that's riding like a dragon or something, and then LED background? Yeah, definitely. But you would need to have like a physical, like a practical piece for the dragon, right? Because that's the part that the actor is interacting with. So depending on how you shoot it, if you're going to be up close for, the part where you see the actor, then you need to at least have like a body, like a frame of that dragon, right? Maybe just the back of the dragon. And then when you pop out for the wide shots, that could be all digital, because then the audience can't really tell because you're not too close to it. So by doing that, you can kind of cheat the effect of like, oh, you see this dragon and the guy's on there, and then you pop into the close-up and the guy's like, and then you pop back out.
Sounds really interesting. Thank you so much.
And then I do have a question for Johnny. Johnny, you use a video game thing, no? So my question is, did were you working together with the company to actually be able to do that? They were doing it on the place, or how did you got to do all the things you wanted for the film from them?
We were creating the piece for the video game company, and so they were really collaborative. There were a lot of checks and balances because that's their IP, and so they wanted to make sure that we weren't messing with it too much. So there was a lot of back and forth, and we had to send test frames to show them what we were doing. And they were on set. There was 12 people from clients and agency on set, double checking every frame, every shot that we were doing to make sure that it felt in line with the game. So it was a really collaborative process, and they were really great to work with. Gave me plenty of rope to run and play before we had to rein it in a little bit. But for the most part, they were awesome. And so it was, I don't know that you could go do that with other games, just get access to those Unreal files. I can't imagine that that's possible, but maybe there's a developer kit for some of them. But yeah, it was for the client was the gaming company. So
perfect. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for both for answering our questions. We're coming back to you, Scott.
Okay, yeah, thanks a lot, guys. I mean, this is great. It's opening up a huge sort of rabbit warren of craziness to go down and delve into it. Byron, for someone who's not a video effects developer and whatever, you inspire us a little bit by actually getting in and spending the time. And it is only to achieve greatness. The only thing about it is hard work and no sleep. So that's great. Johnny, I love the fact that they gave you a lot of rope and you didn't hang yourself. So that's a good thing. Guys, we're gonna close out soon. Again, I can't wait to start going to my clients and talking to them about it. I think there was a couple of takeaways for me. Is I must learn about Unreal. I must learn more about that. I also love the fact that you can use both. I think the idea that it's just not one or the other. There can be a melange of the two, and the idea of saving things in post. Because we always say we can save things in post, but I think pre is always a good thing. If you can save half of it in pre-production, then half of it in post, I guess then we all win. But just to start closing down here a little bit, is there any advice? I'll go first to you, Byron. Is there any advice you'd give to these young independent filmmakers now who want to go and make their shoot against the wall?
My biggest advice, honestly, is to learn Unreal Engine. It's a free software, and I believe it's going to be the future of filmmaking. Whether you're just a writer or you're a cinematographer or a production designer, you're going to want to know how that engine works. So get out there, learn this. There's tons of free material online that you can do, the tutorials. You just have to go out and do it. So good luck. It's going to be a fun ride.
Love it. Johnny?
I think find a team to complement what Byron was saying. Find a team of people that are really good at stuff that you're not good at. And it's surprising how collaborative people can be, whether they're in the same city or across the world. Find creatives that you like, that do stuff that you don't do. And if you've got the right story and you've got the right vision, people will jump on board faster than you can imagine. And then you've got people to help you realize that vision. And if you don't know Unreal, and I agree, you probably should start at least exploring it. If you don't, find a great creator that does. And maybe during their downtime, they'd be willing to work with you on your project. I think people don't utilize each other enough. I think that there is oftentimes this competitive nature of like, well, so-and-so's doing that, I'm don't need to work with them, or I have to be better than them. And there is enough creativity and there's enough work out there for everybody. So I don't think it should be a competition. I think it should be like, get the best people you possibly can and put them on if they're your competitor, put them on your team and they'll support you, you support them, and everybody gets to make something cool. So
love it. And get away from this, everybody, because that's not going to save all your problems and make you great films. Johnny and Byron, fabulous. I mean, I learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience did, and I know for sure the Echo crew did. fabulous. Keep in touch, guys. I mean, we'll bounce in and we'll tag you on whatever on our thing, but keep in touch. We love what you're doing, and we'd love to sort of hear more about it and do whatever. And Byron might be able to host a little online tutorial on Unreal Engine at some stage, because I will be the first guy to tune in. Guys, thank you very much. I'm just going to give a little plug now to ECU, the European Independent Film Festival, which is we're honoured that it's known as the Sundance of Europe. We're closing submissions in 5 days' time. Our job is to discover, project, and promote the world's best independent films, and that's what we'll be doing in Paris in April this year. We'll be screening, up to 100 of the world's best indie films here. On top of that, we've got the All Asian Independent Film Festival in October in Phnom Penh. So those of you who are eligible to compete in the Asian region, please have a look at that. It's AAIFFasia.com. And we'll be shortly announcing, and we're getting closer, we're inching closer to be able to announce the All African Independent Film Festival, which will be taking place in September in Kigali, Rwanda. We haven't pulled the trigger on it yet, but we're very, very close. So again, what a pleasure it was to talk to these people out there making stuff. So all of us creators, sometimes the hardest thing is to pull our boots on and start creating, but that's definitely given me a push, learning more about these damn LED walls, which I can't wait to play with. So I'd like to thank Rodrigo, and thanks to Seth and everybody who made this happen, the ECU crew. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you again next week for another ECU Friday Live.
Thank you.